One gift that God has given me is the gift of pattern recognition. Maybe this goes hand in hand with the gift of discernment, I don't know, but ever since I was very young, I've noticed minute, small details that people would overlook or were unable to notice. And I've always been very aware of my surroundings. I have always been very aware of my environment, and I think this is what goes hand in hand with my ability to recognize small, minute patterns. And a pattern that I observed from having worked in sales and in retail for a 5-year time period is that nearly all couples, whether that be married couples, partnerships, relationships, whatever you want to call it, all couples, I want to say above the age of 50, up through maybe 75 years old, nearly all of them, bar none, all seem discontent, frustrated with each other, angry at each other, and there's this wave of tension that you can feel the second they come into your presence. And I have observed these patterns through their body language, with how they interact with one another, their continence, and how they communicate with one another. Very sarcastic, easily irritated, easily annoyed. And it's not just, like an irritation or a minor annoyance. It's animosity. And the thing is I know a lot of you are probably thinking or saying to yourself, well, you're still young, you haven't even been married yet, and these people, they've been together for decades, and after a while you just get on each other's nerves. And I understand that. But like I said, it's not an annoyance or an irritation. It's something that seems to go deeper than that. And like I said, this is so frequent, this is so common that there is a pattern, which means that there has to be an underlying reason or cause for why this is. And the other thing that I have noticed about just boomers in general, and I think this ties in with the first observation, and I'll explain at the end of this video why I think these two observations are interlinked, is that the boomers don't seem to be aging well. And I'm not saying this to sound dark, but I'm just saying this because I'm being truthful, and this is what I have observed as a general pattern. All the boomers, they don't really look like they're getting old per se, but they look more like they're deteriorating. They look like they're unraveling. They look like they're shriveling up, honestly. And I know a lot of you are probably thinking, well, it's just a part of getting old. It's not, your body ages, and it's just part of the natural process, and you don't know what they're going through, and da-da-da-da-da. But here's the thing. I have looked at so many pictures, so many photographs, so many video documents from 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 years ago, and all the old people back in those time periods, they just looked like they were getting old. They didn't look like they were deteriorating. They didn't look like they were becoming, like they were morphing into something. The boomers now, they all look like they're haunted or something. Like, it doesn't look like a natural form of aging. It's almost like you're seeing the after effects of what they have done in their youth. And that's what I believe is causing all this discontentment in their relationships, all this dysfunctionality, all this strife, all this bad aging, if you want to call it that, is that they're reaping what they have sown. And again, I am not saying this to be dark. I'm not saying this even to be judgmental. I am saying this because I am being honest and open about what I have observed about them. But think about it. The boomer generation, they were probably the first generation in several hundred years that had enough opportunity, that had enough freedom, that had enough prosperity, that they adopted the whole mindset of play first, work later. They were the first generation to overvalue youth and base their whole lives around what they did when they were younger. I think the boomers were also the first generation to develop this notion that, oh, after you turn 25 or after you turn 30, your life goes downhill, because they lived it up in their youth. They spent their youth partying, drinking, drugs, sexual revolution, Woodstock, all that crap. I don't think this phenomenon occurred in all the generations prior to that. If it did, it wasn't at the same mass scale that it did with the boomer generation. I feel like the boomer generation were the first generation to introduce partying and drugs and, living with no limitations. But anyways, now as they're getting old, you're seeing the after effects of all their poor decisions. You're seeing the consequences and the result through their dysfunctional relationships, through their aging process. They're not reaping good age, or good. They haven't made it a privilege to become old. So anyways, where I'm going with this is, I often hear the boomers say, why don't these millennials get married? None of them are interested in marriage. They just all cohabitate. They're so unstable. And I personally believe it is the fault, not 100%, but it is mostly the fault of the boomers. And I can back this opinion up because the boomers were the generation with the highest divorce rate, I think. 50% or over that. And the millennials and the generation after the millennials, we were the first generations to see and experience the after effects of their dysfunctionality. So that's basically all we have seen. That's all we have known. That's all we have experienced. We didn't have a positive model of what marriage is supposed to be. We didn't have a positive example set for us. And by me saying positive example, I don't mean a Disney movie. I don't mean a TV show. I don't mean a romance novel. I mean we never saw what a healthy marriage looked like on a mass scale. At least half of us. And the other 50% probably saw their share of dysfunction too. 50% as in the 50% of millennials who grew up in two-parent households. So this is just my theory. I believe I'm right. And again, I'm not trying to sound dark. I'm just being honest. And yeah, this is what I have observed.